TaxAct can think of a million things more fun than filing taxes. TaxAct is going to name some now. Sitting in traffic. Folding a fitted bedsheet. Listening to your coworker talk about his fantasy team. Digging a hole. Digging an even larger hole next to that original hole. Unfortunately, TaxAct's filing software can't make taxes fun. But TaxAct can help you get them done. TaxAct. Let's get them over with.
The Roger Stone Show on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
And we're back. Well, we now know that while President Donald Trump gave peace a chance, the talks this weekend, headed by J.D. Vance, along with the president's son-in-law, very capable and able Jared Kushner, and Special Envoy Steve Witkoff, ended in no deal. As many of us suspected, the Iranians were just stalling for time. I think they're now going to find out what it's like to cross Donald Trump. He's given them every chance for peace, and they have no interest in peace. They want to continue to subjugate their people, and they want to develop a nuclear weapon with which they could destroy the world. A man who knows more about this than perhaps anyone in the country today, former Congressman, Senator from New Jersey, Bob Torricelli. We used to call him the Torch. He was the boy wonder of New Jersey politics, 7 terms in the House. Every political operative I know respects Bob Torricelli because before he went to the House, he was a political operative like us, worked for Walter Mondale. And of course, I was working for Ronald Reagan at the time. But in the Senate, he had an extraordinarily distinguished career. He was one of the leading voices against communism and the brutal Cuban dictatorship in our hemisphere. And he actually served on the Senate Finance, Government Affairs, Foreign Relations, Judiciary, and Rules Committee. But he is universally viewed as an expert on foreign policy in both the Middle East and in this hemisphere. Has been a strong supporter of the democratic opposition in Iran, and therefore we turn to him today to try to decipher what comes next. Every time we have him on the show, our ratings go through the ceiling. So, Bob, the folks out in there in New Jersey must still love you. I'm delighted to have you join us today on the Roger Stone Show.
Thank you, Roger. It's a propitious moment. It's an extraordinary afternoon to take a look at this situation. We're going to remember these few days.
Well, you and to a great degree, I agreed with you. You were a voice of caution here. You thought that a strategic approach where we continued to bomb the Iranian Republican Guard targets and you would ultimately cause an uprising of the police, the military, and the people. Generally speaking, when people don't have food, they get very, very upset. The president must have thought, based on his intelligence, that the Iranians' development of a nuclear device with which they could threaten and destroy the world was closer than maybe the rest of us thought, and he made a decision. And then at the last minute, when he had all of his military forces arrayed, it appeared that the regime blinked, passing a new peace proposal through the Pakistanis, causing the peace talks this weekend. Vice President J.D. Vance has now announced that those peace talks have failed. So the real question is, what's next?
Well, Roger, I would caution people now in your audience, so whether people agreed with what President Trump did or not, if they're on the right of the MAGA movement and may have thought that the United States shouldn't have been involved, or the left of the Democratic Party and opposed military intervention as a matter of principle, none of that really matters right now. We're being challenged by a theocracy in the Middle East, bent on terrorizing its own people and on getting a nuclear weapon. They've challenged the United States, and they've challenged the world. They're now going to attempt to control the Straits of Hormuz, which would be an incredible precedent for nations around the world, that you can close these choke points and control international commerce. I don't care who you are, what your philosophy is, what your party is, that cannot be allowed to stand. The Chinese would notice that with the Straits of Taiwan. Indonesia would notice it with the Malacca Straits. The Danish could notice it with access to the Baltic. And the Turks could note it as well, and the choke points to the Black Sea. It would be international chaos. So no matter who you are or where you're from, that cannot stand. Second, it appears that despite the incredible beating the Iranians have taken, that they've hardened their position on their getting nuclear weapons. A regime that is this radical and this irresponsible simply cannot be allowed to have nuclear weapons. I hope across partisan lines on that we can all agree. So I think, personally, Roger, I think the president's options are quite limited. If there's not a reversal of Iranian position, and not very soon, the United States Navy is going to have to open the Straits of Hormuz.
General Michael Flynn was on this show 6 weeks ago, and he said they're perfectly capable of doing that, and I believe that he is correct. It would be nice if our NATO allies, who benefit from the nearly 20% of the world's oil that flows through the Straits, would help us. Not only will they not help us, in most cases they won't even let us use our bases in their country. That's a separate conversation.
It's been disgraceful. I mean, Tony Blair pointing out that the British not allowing the United States to use air bases in Britain when the cornerstone of British defense is the United States Air Force is beyond irresponsible. And I'm very disappointed in the Italians not allowing our air bases in Sicily to be used. That may, however, Roger, change. Iran has not just challenged the United States. They've challenged the entire international community by closing the Straits of Hormuz. And I would think now, if President Trump goes back to the allies and says, we're going to open the Straits of Hormuz, we're going to remove all these mines, and then we're going to place it under international supervision until this conflict is ended, I think you'd start getting some support, at least from the British. And President Trump is probably right. We really don't need anybody's help, but it would make it easier, and it would make it fairer. Removing all those mines may not be easy. It's been suggested in the press, I don't know, that the Iranians may not even know where all the mines are. They just put them out into the straits. That's going to be difficult. And when this is all over, too, Roger, I hope people learn a lesson that we have gone from Ronald Reagan's goal was to have a 500-ship Navy. That was his bottom line. We're now at 350 and falling. Navies are not obsolete. They are essential for our economic security and our physical security. And when this is over, I hope the President and the Congress take a good, hard look at the size and capability of the United States Navy. Simply because it's powerful and the finest in the world does not mean it's necessarily sufficient.
Speak, if you will, to the brutality of this regime. I'm not sure if you will remember this, but about a year ago, you asked me to have dinner with three members of the MEK, the opposition, in South Florida. They very graciously flew in. We had a great dinner, but there was only two of them. And I said, gentlemen, I thought there was a third guy who was supposed to join us. They said, oh, yeah, unfortunately, he got assassinated in Paris last week. This is an extraordinarily brutal regime, and the courage of the Iranian people to rise up against this bloodthirsty regime is a story of stunning courage.
You know, Roy, one of the frustrations I have as someone who has spent his life in American foreign policy is I've learned that for the American people, if the New York Times isn't there, it didn't happen. So if you read in the American press today the situation in Iran, you'll learn that there is no other opposition. There's no choice but the mullahs or the Shah's son, and there's no overthrowing this regime. Well, you know this why? Because you're reporting from London or sitting at your desk in New York? How is it you came to this conclusion? Thousands of brave people have died on the streets of Iranian cities against this regime and continue to die. They're executing some every day. The MEK, by example, and it's not the only group in the diaspora, but when the Shah was overthrown some 47 years ago, that coalition included many people, communists, socialists, professional groups, military groups, and a group called the MEK, which is democratic origin. As soon as the Ayatollah consumed power and monopolized power, they split. And they've been a democratic opposition in exile ever since. It's estimated that in 1988, 100,000 of their members were killed by the clerical regime in Tehran. This is a group that is dedicated to a democratic Iran, a non-nuclear Iran, a secular Iran, a gender-equal Iran, at peace with its neighbors and the West. And interestingly, not asking the United States to do its fighting. They did support attacks on the IRGC, but do not support American troops entering the country. They believe that with the IRGC weakened sufficiently, in time the people on the streets will take power and overthrow the regime. But it frustrates me so to continue to hear the news media and the State Department continue to argue that there's simply no alternative. There is an alternative. And ultimately, we can open the Straits of Hormuz, we can destroy their nuclear capability, we can destroy their ballistic missile capability, but ultimately the only way to get peace in the region is the regime has to be overthrown. And the only way to do that is the Iranian people, not the American people, the Iranian people.
This is an extraordinarily dangerous regime. You were telling me some time ago that how you figured out that your email and your cell phone were being hacked by the Iranians had to do with your being invited to a conference, I believe.
Yeah, they may be evil, but they're not stupid. Remember, this is a regime that planned the assassination of President Trump, actually had an active assassination attempt against John Bolton and John Pompeo, and I have the distinct honor of also being on their terrorist list. They actually created a fake invitation for me to go to a conference in the Persian Gulf several years ago. Having read my emails, they duplicated perfectly other invitations I'd received, sent me this. Only by chance, I called the offices of the sponsoring organization to change my flight when I was told that they apologized, but they hadn't invited me. It had all been done by Iranian operatives. So for all of us who have been involved in efforts against the Iranian government, they are dangerous people. And to this day, as you noted, the MEK continues to lose members in Europe, no less than Iran, to assassination.
Late last year, my lawyer was contacted by the FBI, who insisted that the Iranians had hacked my email, both my email accounts. I have more than one. I have one encrypted one that I don't believe they hacked, but they wouldn't have found anything interesting other than my mother's recipe for chicken cacciatore. But nonetheless, it's chilling to know that a brutal regime like this is hacking your email. We'll talk about this a bit more when we come back, but the idea that we would replace a theocracy, a brutal theocracy, with a return to the monarchy and the son of the Shah is actually of huge public relations benefit to the current regime. See, the Shah has no support in the country. The Shah was every bit as brutal to the people under their vaunted Savak, their secret police. Now, like Nixon, I agreed that at least the Shah was an ally of the United States, and at least he kept ride on these radicals, but he was not exactly a paragon of human rights. And when you see all these videos, and you'll see lots of them, and by the way, we'll be pummeled with bots this afternoon telling us that the House of Pahlavi should be restored. There is no public support for the Shah. He has a zero chance of governing that country. The people don't want him any more than they want the regime. And Rudy Giuliani, the former mayor, has been particularly strong and articulate on this subject. So for those of you who thought when the president said, well, we're talking to some more moderate elements in the country, for those who thought that was the son of the Shah, first of all, he's not a moderate. Secondarily, he has no public support. And the videos they post up of him being surrounded with huge groups of supporters, they're being shot in London. That's called astroturfing. Talking to the OG. I know what it looks like when I see it. We're talking to Senator Bob Torricelli, former member of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, about the situation in Iran, and we'll be right back. And we're back. We're talking to former New Jersey Senator Bob Torricelli, a.k.a. The Torch, one of the smartest guys I know when it comes to foreign policy, particularly in the Middle East and in this hemisphere. He is, of course, the author of the legislation creating the Cuban embargo, kind of an odd thing today. There aren't many hardline anti-communist Democrats, but Bob, who I think you'd have to call a liberal Democrat generally in his outlook, but on foreign policies matters, he always supported a strong national defense and a hard line against Marxism in this hemisphere. Let me ask you the toughest question. If you were president, Senator Torricelli, for the balance of the time we have left here, if you were the president right now, what would you do?
I'm going to tell you what I do, Roger, because I know you talk to the president, and I hope that our advice will be consistent, because I think this is such an important moment in American history. The Ayatollah has given the United States really no choice. I think that the United States needs to seize those Channel Islands in the Straits of Hormuz with a Marine Corps amphibious landing. It may have to land on some areas along the Straits of Hormuz and simply destroy anything that moves on the borders of the Straits of Hormuz, to open up the straits again, and continue to suppress Iranian ability to manufacture ballistic missiles and drones, and obviously any effort to extract that nuclear fuel. Their situation is unsustainable. I know they're tough. I know they've been through a lot. I know they are still fighting back, but there's just so much punishment that people can take. The economy is in complete ruins. The military has been destroyed. Just the president needs to see this through. And the American people, whether you're with the president or not, whether you thought it was a good idea or not, this is a dangerous world. If the United States ever takes a military stand and an economic stand and fails, because adversaries will notice and we will get tested everywhere. This cannot fail.
And if you were giving a word of advice to our NATO allies who've been so anxious to get us to pony up for their defense and support of the Ukrainian regime. By the way, they haven't had an election in Ukraine in a long time. What would be your advice to our NATO allies?
Very simply, we understand the advantages of NATO. We understand that they are mutual. But our first responsibility is to ourselves. And you need to be there now. And if you do not, then we need to start not ending the NATO treaty. I think that would be a mistake. But we certainly don't need to have 50,000 soldiers in Germany. We don't need to maintain this infrastructure. We don't need to give them access to the latest technology. They need to step up and be for America when America needs them.
I have to ask you this question because you had a very distinguished political career, 7 terms in the House, serving in the Senate, ran the senatorial committee for your fellow Democrats. Do you miss public office?
I miss the large public policy issues. You know, I love the country so deeply, and I've given so much of my life to it. When you see these painful moments, and you know that if we get this wrong, a generation's going to pay a price for it. These are not issues of the moment. They last generations. I miss not being in the room trying to do right by the country. But as you know, Roger, more than I, the price of this has become so high. The nonsense. I one of the happiest days of my life is when I got elected to the Congress. The second happiest day of my life is when I left. It's just the price on your quality of life and your family is just insurmountable. And I don't know how we get back to the point where people can be in public service, feel they're doing something worthwhile, but not jeopardizing their health, their lives, and their family. And I say this knowing that what you endured was worse, but it's a high price. And I do think, too, my fellow Democrats who are concerned now about the Justice Department, whether it's being weaponized, let me assure you something. Don't forget Bill Clinton. Don't forget the weaponization that took place there, or somewhat against Al Gore, against me. If Donald Trump can succeed in separating the Justice Department and the FBI from being used politically, it will be a contribution to the whole country.
All right, we're going to have to leave it there. Robert J. Torricelli, the last great Democrat senator from the Garden State. Thanks for joining us today in the Stone Zone, my friend.
Thanks for listening to The Roger Stone Show. You can hear The Roger Stone Show Sunday afternoons at 3. If you like the podcast, share it with your friends and listen anytime at WABCRadio.com and download the WABC Radio app. Hit that subscribe button on all major podcast platforms. Plus, follow WABC on social on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, and X. See you next time for a new episode so you never have to wonder.
What the heck is going on here?